Good afternoon. It is Tuesday, January 7th. It is 2 minutes past noon. This is a meeting of the Conservation Commission's Subcommittee on Land Use. And we have an agenda today where we're going to be talking about community gardens, bird banding, indigenous land acknowledgement, and we'll talk about bird banding first. And we have present Bruce Stedman, Commissioner, Aaron Jacques, Amherst staff. We're expecting Dave Zomack, Amherst staff, and Michelle Lobb, Commissioner. And I'm going to pause just for a second to have Michelle come on.
She's not there. The person who's number 4 is Rachel.
I didn't send this material to Rachel because she's not a subcommittee, and we had some discussion about that. But if Rachel wants to join us, she's more than welcome as far as I'm concerned. So I was a little concerned about sending documents outside of the official commission, subcommittee members. And I have to admit, it was reluctant not to send them to her because she's been so helpful.
Well, from what I can see on my screen, it just says Rachel. We don't know that it's Rachel Leffler until.
Well, it
Yeah,
probably
I'm sure
is.
it is.
It probably is if you want to let her in.
Sure.
Also, Bruce, I sent out a copy of a federal bird banding permit.
I saw that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. And hi, Rachel.
Hi, I don't have to be here. I just wasn't sure if it would be helpful or not, but I can leave too.
No,
Yeah. Hi,
you
Michelle.
can absolutely attend.
Okay,
You just can't vote.
okay. My hands are tied.
Okay.
You send her the documents?
I can forward them to her.
Okay. Michelle has her hair all pulled back. Hardly looks like Michelle.
In 2 dimensions, anyway.
Okay, Dave is going to join us a little later, so we're going to flip around the order of things and do bird banding first. And Michelle, you may have noticed that I sent out a copy of a federal bird banding permit.
Yep. I looked it over.
And it will give Rachel a chance to look at the documents. And Rachel, I'm sorry that you didn't get them beforehand. There was some concern about sending documents beyond the members of the subcommittee, so I refrained from doing that.
I did add them to the Concom packet just because we were overlapping.
Okay,
Our
Rachel,
meeting
did you
weeks.
see them there?
I did not, but I will look at them there now. Yeah, not a
Okay.
problem. Not a problem.
Okay.
So good.
So just starting with bird banding. And Michelle's comment was we don't need this because it's all covered in research and another topic. And
But also it's also covered by this federal permit, which you need to band. So anyway, go on.
so you might ask, well, what caused Alex to spend the time to put this together if it's already covered? And we just had a bird banding permit application come before us. And the commission didn't ask any questions at all. I started to ask a few questions and I got a response. Dave came out of silence and said, well, this guy does this all the time. He's a professional bird bander. He knows what he's doing. And the impression was, let's just leave him alone. And I thought to myself, this is the only activity on conservation land that requires a federal permit, period.
Well, Alex, any bird banding requires a federal permit. So I think we've allowed it before. We've at least considered it, but
Yeah. And so There was no, that was exactly the reaction of the commission. We've allowed it before, let's not spend much time on it. And there are a lot of do's and don'ts associated with the federal permit. So I chose to codify them so that commissioners can know what they are. There isn't a commissioner, I don't believe, now or in the past, who's ever seen a federal bird banding permit or knows what's on them. So I thought it would be useful to codify it in our own rules. And that goes beyond what's covered in research or the other rule that you cited. And the reason I did that to codify them is so that somebody would say, well, let's look at his banding permit and what is he authorized to do? And does that line up with what he's asking us to do? And I thought that was reasonable, Michelle.
Yeah, so some history. I thought you were on the commission already, but like I think 3 years ago, Alex, they came to us with the same proposal as in Kestrel for the saw-whet banding. And at that meeting, I did ask a lot of questions. I think I was a new commissioner at that point. And we, in our land use agreement with them, we had requirements that including providing the federal permit number and other things like holding time and minimizing like light shine and moving owls to observation areas, much like similar to actually what you said. So thank you for covering that in my absence. I think we've just been like renewing that permit from 3 or 4 years ago until they came back to us last time. So there is some history with commissioner input on it, which again was very similar to what you said. And I just want to say that was formerly a bird bander for many years, and I banded under a federal permit like that. And I think that referencing the permit or possibly requesting the permit is maybe one way that we could approach it. I think that boiling all the things down you said is confirm that, activities will be in correspondence with federal permit to me is sufficient. And then through the land use application, I added as an impetus, this banding program was the impetus in part for some of the language that I put into the research application section of our rules and policies. That's why I asked Aaron to find it. I have no idea how to find our other sections right now, but I really wanted everybody to be able to see that because in it provides some good guidelines for what the commissioners should ask and request of an applicant. And I had this exact thing in mind. So what I was going to suggest is that we take what you've written and just make sure that it is covered adequately by the research section and maybe add another line for bird banding and confirmation that it's under a federal permit. But every single person that bans has to be covered under that federal permit. And so things like, I just didn't think we need to write in, don't keep a bird for 24 hours or something like that. Like that to me is kind of crazy to think about anyone doing that anyway. So anyway, my point being that I think that we should revisit the research section and see if it's covering the section that you wrote. And I just don't see why we should be calling out bird banning specifically when there's other semi-invasive monitoring programs that are also proposed on conservation lands.
I disagree. Which is why,
Okay, well, why are we calling out bird banding and not like turtle monitoring or small mammal trapping or anything else that requires a permit to do under?
particularly because this requires a federal permit. It's the only activity I can think of which goes to that level. And there wasn't a question asked by any commissioner when this came up. As I said, nobody referred to the agreement that you just mentioned. I think we're dealing with the shifting baseline syndrome where people forget, people turn over, they have no knowledge of what you just said. And it did not come up at all except for Dave, who broke silence as a staffer and advising the commission during its meeting that this fellow's done this a long time. He's a professional and we don't need to oversee him. So be that as it may, this one bird bander with Kestrel, there may be others that come along. And what is here codifies what is on a banding permit. And it does say holding birds for longer than 24 hours. I don't know why it says that, but it does say live birds shall be released as soon as practical after capture. And I think the 24 hours is dead birds.
Or injured birds or birds that need to be revived or something. So I just want to follow that. I think having all of this under the research land use application in place is where we should keep it, so commissioners see it there and know what to ask by reviewing that section. If this is kept separately, then it's like a standalone thing that doesn't make any sense to me. And the conservation doesn't need to be the one codifying. These are federal laws. Like, people can go to jail if they don't follow it. I don't think that it's not our business. Let's just say the commission shall confirm that all federal, state, and other permits are being conformed to, and can request of the applicant though to review those permits.
That didn't happen, and I don't think it will happen.
But that's why I started revising that research section, which nobody has right now, and I don't know where it is, but I really want it to be circulated to everybody, because I really beefed it up. And so nobody has the current document, which includes all of this coverage. I am constantly reviewing research applications for conservation lands that involve federal and state permits. And like, this is pretty status quo. We don't make the rules on our own land. The feds make the rules, the state makes the rules, and we just confirm that everybody has their permits and are following them. And it's not really our business to be managing that researcher and their federal permit.
We can, excuse me, but we can have rules that go beyond federal and state.
We can, and those are bylaws, but everything in the bird banding section you wrote is just a reiteration of the federal permit.
That's absolutely true. And I was going to put in some other stuff, but I frankly ran out of time and thought I'd put this in front of you folks to make it better. What I would propose, if we can find the document on research proposals that Michelle has been working on, which has disappeared, then maybe we can blend the two. But I would like for there to be some codification of what's required for bird banding, so that commissioners in the future, so that we presently don't have to rely on somebody going and spending a great deal of effort to do homework. The commissioners don't do that. They listen to what Aaron has to say and say, okay. And as somebody who does spend a lot of time looking into projects, I think it's easier to have stuff in the code for us. I'll just stop there, Bruce.
I'm in the middle between you. I think probably we should do the suggestion that Alex just gave of finding a way to blend it into the research. I still have my questions. Why is it only migratory? What if somebody comes and wants to ban somebody, birds who live there all year round? And then on the other one was about federally listed. Why is it only those?
Yeah, so the last one is what it says on the permit.
Okay, I'm just saying.
I can answer that question, Bruce. So the MBTA, the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, is what that permit is covering, and that's migratory birds. Non-migratory birds aren't covered by any kind of regulation. So I guess you maybe don't even need a bird banding permit, except that you almost can never just capture a non-migratory bird. The second one is that you need a separate permit for any kind of threatened or endangered species. You need a take permit.
No, I understand all that. What I was saying was, if someone wants to take something that's not threatened, we might not want them to do that.
So all gallinaceous birds are not covered by the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. For example, turkeys or any bird that lays eggs on the ground. most birds are migratory from the law standpoint of the law, Bruce. And they are covered by the Migratory Bird Treaty Act.
Okay.
So my screen just went blank.
Okay, well, okay, I guess that answers my questions.
Yeah,
I'm
so,
inclined to say we should meld it into the research section and move on to other things.
And can I just say, Alex, I agree with you that the commissioners, if they don't have any experience, especially with something like that, they may not know what questions to ask. And that's sometimes where the silence comes from. But I was trying to make the research section also sort of a place that gives the impetus for some of the questions or suggested things for the commissioners to look further into. And so when we look at your bird section and the research section side by side, maybe we can incorporate prompts for commissioners to ask certain questions like what permit is, can we review it, things like that. So it's not just rules, but actually sort of guidance for how to review these kinds of research and monitoring proposals.
yeah, I can't see the full screen. All I see is Michelle. For some reason, Michelle, I think you are unusual in your experience. And so the drafting was not for you. It was for future commissioners, present commissioners, future commissioners who have no background.
And I'm a good example of that. And so my guess is that this isn't the only section of our big document that's useful for prompting questions from the commissioners.
Yeah, I mean, Alex, I agree with your intent. I just think that we should roll it into the research section. So if things are similar to it, but not quite bird banding, still get the same treatment from commissioners in terms of what we're asking for and what we're paying attention to.
I heard him agree to that.
Okay, I'm not going to agree until I see what it is we're actually talking about.
Well, I meant the concept of merging.
Okay, I'm sorry. I've got a problem with the screen where I'm seeing all of you is about 2 inches by 1.5 inches in the upper right-hand corner of my computer. I'm not quite sure what happened to me.
If you go to view, maybe you changed your view somehow to speaker view and not gallery.
Yeah, I don't know. Huh.
Yeah, if you go to the upper right-hand corner of the Zoom screen, Alex, you might see like my view. It's like a little square with 3 dots over the top, or it's like 6 or 9 dots, or
Yeah, right now I've got my calendar in front of me and I may have to log off and come back in.
Alex, at the bottom of your screen, you see a little Z and blue button.
A little what?
A little blue button in the ribbon at the bottom of your screen.
Yep,
Can you click on that?
yep.
And then does it pull it up bigger?
It's got, a lot of icons on it, including Zoom.
Yeah, click on the Zoom button.
I gotta get something out of the way here. So I'm sorry, this is taking up time.
That's fine. I just wanted to say that I think this conversation would be better informed if we could look at it side by side with the research section.
Yeah.
Michelle,
Hey, go ahead.
sorry, I had my hand raised, but I know you can't see me, Alex. Michelle, the research section, I'm trying to find like my most up-to-date version of the land use policy that I've edited. And it's a little challenging because at some point in time, it broke into sections and then individual sections were sort of taken out and edited. When you said the research section, I just wanted to clarify that. So in our land use application, have some questions there. I remember working with you on that like quite a while ago to make sure that we're asking a series of questions directed towards research related information to make sure we're getting the right questions asked, but you're talking about there was a specific section. I know
No,
research.
I mean, it's like sort of, it's within the land use application section, but research is kind of called out into its own criteria.
Well, I'm
Okay.
sure what Michelle wrote is thorough. I just want to see it and see how we can blend things. But I don't want to let go of pointing to bird banding as an activity. And what I would like to put a stop to is this guy's a professional. He knows what he's doing, so on and so forth. That may be one individual. We have no idea what's coming down the pike. And you have an agreement with Kestrel, which is not incorporated anywhere. Everybody's forgotten about it. It certainly didn't come up when this application came in. So we have a shifting baseline. And we have a shifting baseline.
Yeah, well, I agree that we should sort of codify the process and questions, but I just support doing that in the land use application because that's how these things come to us. And I think, you know, if this were like 2 decades ago, we could have been seeing a lot of turtle monitoring because there was a big grad student push. So just think about if, you know, in 5 years, there's a big graduate program in monitoring bats or something like that, because they'll be listed, or monarchs or something.
Yeah, I
So,
heard that there is a turtle that is present in Amherst that may be federally listed in the very near future. Just
so I mean, my bigger point is to not necessarily call out bird banning in particular, but like research and monitoring applications on conservation land so that it can evolve with whatever is happening.
Well, under 3B, the detailed research study plan should include, and there's a whole lot of stuff there, purpose and need, objectives. That's kind of probably a lot like you wrote.
Yeah.
And so that fits nicely. Let's figure out what to do with the rest of it once we get a hold of what you've written. And it's around somewhere. I'll look. Maybe I have it. Or maybe Bruce has a copy.
I'll look.
Well, let's we've probably hammered this one to death. And
Yeah, can I just ask, like, for practical purposes, Erin, is there like a repository of these drafts that we can go look at, you know, what we've done so far? Because it's really hard to keep track of.
yeah, it is hard. I mean, I have drafts that were so that for a time I was updating the drafts and keeping sort of master copies of them and distributing them. At a certain point in time with the editing process, sections were sort of pulled out and then we were going through it section by section. So um, I'm feeling very out of the like pinpointing the most updated draft of various sections. I guess I'm feeling a little challenged by that.
All
Um,
right, I'll
I
look
mean,
at my email communications and see
I,
if I can find something.
Aaron, your hand's still up.
yeah, I've got to take it down.
So I have a copy of everything that the commission has approved so far. And Aaron does too, because she's the one who posted it for the commission. Anyways, moving on, our task, I guess, is to find what Michelle has drafted and come back to this at another meeting. Hi, Dave. Welcome. Are there any members of the public with us now, Aaron,
No.
Bruce? Okay,
Oh.
make sure. Okay, so are we done with bird banding for now?
Yes.
Okay. And Bruce, if you look at the backside of the federal permit that I sent you under general questions, you'll find that what I codified is pretty much word for word of look at items 11 down.
Okay, I'll read it.
And for example, mist netting is not allowed unless it actually said so on the federal permit. So if somebody comes in and wants to mist net, but it's not allowed on his permit, then we have a problem.
All right, I'll read it.
Okay. Community gardens. This may be one of the oldest things that was been kicking around during this whole subcommittee. And Rachel, you have the 12-3 draft in front of you?
Yep.
Okay. So I yellow highlighted stuff that's new. And the stuff that I added on the 2nd of January is in red type. That's F. So that you guys can keep track of the changes. Coming down through here, Aaron was kind enough to give me the square footage of both community gardens. They're in there. And to start off this discussion, I know I've read everybody's deliberation in the emails. I don't recall ever seeing any documentation of the commission granting the town its permission to have community gardens. I think this is something that goes way back beyond me. And I don't know if it was even Dave who started it or Pete Westover or where it came from. But this is another shifting baseline perhaps, but I don't recall there being ever, or at least put it this way, I have never found a document where the commission authorized community gardens. So it just evolved. And Amherst staff, and several people have been involved, Stephanie, for example, and others. And it's worked, they're very popular, and it's a nice for Dave when he gets asked by Paul, so what are the benefits of this conservation land? We can say, well, for one, we have community gardens. So when I drafted this, it was because we had drafted rules and then they went to the staff. We never got anything back from staff. Who takes care of gardens. What Aaron did is put something together, and I thought, well, let's just cut it loose. Let's just get the commission out of this and have the town do it. So the choices to me was either cut it loose with a few rules or have them come in for a permit or a license. And coming in for a permit or license would probably be quite disruptive. Don't need to go into that. So that's the way I saw it. Either create a policy that basically gets the commission out of community gardens and in writing delegates everything to the department, except for expansion and new wells and also water as a source, or the source of water has always been an issue to me from the first time I visited the gardens, because there was no water available at Amethyst Brook. That tank was empty. And also water has been an issue for me because people have to lug water a fair distance from the pump. And if they're not, water's heavy. And we can talk about that some more. So that's been an issue for me. And then it occurred to me that because most gardeners are new, often gardeners are new to the community garden. Let me rephrase that. People gardening in the community garden are often new to gardening. And Amethyst Brook in particular is right next to a water supply. So I thought, okay, why not have the town do soil samples, which are simple and easy to do, not costly, and post what would be helpful so that each gardener isn't trying to figure it out for themselves. And that action would be to guard against polluting the waterways with too much fertilizer. And that's a common problem for agriculture. So that's sort of where I was coming from on this. And then the new one was to get some feedback from the department on an annual basis on what's going on with the community garden. And I did say a detailed written annual report, the format and content of which would be developed by the town on its first report. And from then on, whatever that detail is, would be the format and what's expected in the future. So it pretty much leaves it up to the town of what to report. I don't think that's onerous, even though somebody wanted to leave out the word detailed. It leaves it up to the town. And then for the commission to talk about the quality of the report and what's wanted and all that kind of stuff and come to some resolution. So with that, I know I'd like to hear from commissioners first and then the town. And just nobody has their hand up. So I know I've gotten emails from Bruce and Michelle. Bruce.
So basically, my comments had to do with trying to find incremental ways to reduce the workload of the staff where we can. And so I don't feel strongly about these, but it was just, they jumped out at me as a thing to consider. Your minimalist idea of just saying, well, we're going to have community gardens and it's up to the department to figure out how to manage them. We could go there. I'm okay with this as a set of guidelines or rules or whatever you want to call them. That was my take on it.
Michelle.
Yeah, I'm okay with sort of this carve out idea where the town is managing the community garden within the conservation land. And I am concerned that we're the requirements about having water and the hoses, and I mean it's great. It does I guess maybe lightening up on the requirement language would, maybe I'd be in favor of that. And for the report, could it be an oral report at the end of the year, like just a presentation from the staff, or are you thinking like a written document? I just wonder who's going to track that, that it's being submitted on time or at all.
It's going to be, I don't know, is a PowerPoint considered written?
Sure. I really like the thing they did on the CPA proposal. So obviously our staff is good at it.
So
Yeah, I was thinking like maybe it could happen around the same time as CPA, just to help us keep track of it. Just it's sort of a fiscal year thing, and yeah.
So just talking about the report, I think this is pretty wide open. I did want some feedback. We had, issues, or just whatever the town wants to say. And I put down end of calendar year because the gardens close, at the end of the season because of frost, and then they have to clean up by a certain day. And then pretty soon in January, February, it opens up for people reserving their spots for the coming year. So I think it's pretty open in terms of what the town wants to put together, whether it's a PowerPoint or some piece of paper. The only thing going on here is the need for the town to come to the commission and say, what's going on.
I have a suggestion. I'd say instead of at the end of each calendar year, say January 31st of each calendar year, because then you'd avoid all the holiday stresses and give the town, the staff a month to figure out, where did we end up? Did people clean up or not? Or were there issues about water or something? That's my suggestion.
Okay.
I want to caution against having like these deadlines and reports because it's hard to keep track of them even within a singular commission, let alone over time. So one thing we could consider is at the commission's request that we receive a report.
But we won't remember to
Who is
request
gonna-
it either.
I don't agree with that.
Okay, I just am I think it's unlikely that this is gonna last very long.
Well, it becomes a burden of the town to put it on their calendar to report. It isn't necessarily on the commission, although it can very easily be on a calendar that it needs to come in. And if we say, if the commission requests it, the commission will never request it.
I'm inclined to agree with Alex on that. I think we'll be hard pressed to remember to request things. Unless the staff has an overarching calendar that shows all these things that we can go into every month.
Remember that the choice is accept a few things or come in for a license. And if we come in for a license, then there's going to be conditions. And I think what you've got in front of you is not onerous, despite some of your comments. And I'm happy to go through the other things that you think are onerous. But I wrote the thing about reporting to be as open-ended as I possibly could.
No, I didn't take them as onerous. I said what I said already. Just trying to reduce the.
Yeah, I don't really have an issue with the reporting, but maybe we should talk about the other requirements because they do have sort of financial requirements associated with them.
So I'm going to change at the end of the calendar year to January 31 of each year. That's fine with me. I just wrote something hoping somebody would make it better, which you did. So let's go to the other things that you think are onerous. Let's take water. We've heard from Dave that he thinks it's onerous. And I want to lead with an explanation of what I saw and what I think should be. So when I first went to look at the community gardens, Amethyst Brook had a water tank that was empty. And it had something like a fire hose or that led into an irrigation pipe that went down along a string of corn, which had irrigation spigots on it. And it was all by gravity, and I didn't know if it worked or not, but there was no water in the tank. And when I talked with staff, it was an arrangement with a local farmer to keep that tank full, which didn't happen. So gardeners had no water, and I didn't ask, well, who do you call? But there was no water. So down at Amethyst, down at the other garden, there's a hand pump, and people fill their buckets with the hand pump and then lug them. A 5-gallon bucket weighs 40 pounds. And if you have a bum shoulder, that water's not very accessible if you have a garden spot all the way across the garden. And I didn't think it would be onerous to have an elevated storage tank so that everything could be gravity fed and have that tank, like over at Amethyst Brook, connected to some sort of a pipe which is not expensive, which runs around the garden. And then from that, people could attach their garden hoses and by gravity feed, get water. And the hoses could be provided by the gardeners. That is what Northampton does.
Okay.
They don't have a water storage tank elevated. They have a regular water system, but to get a water storage tank is not, doesn't seem to be onerous. To build a platform to put it on to have enough height to get gravity feed doesn't seem onerous. To provide piping to get it fairly close enough that somebody can have a 25-foot garden hose to run to their garden is the burden on them, not the town. I didn't think providing water would get the reaction that I'm getting, frankly.
I thought you were saying the town was going to provide all the hosing too, so I'm sorry if I read that incorrectly.
No, it says to be provided such as
Okay.
garden hoses provided by the users. So
Yeah, it's right there. So
I was trying to eliminate the
I have
struggling,
a-
the struggling
Okay.
that I witnessed of people carrying lots of water. They made 4 and 5 trips to their garden to water from that pump. And to me, somebody would have to ask for, if they have a bum shoulder, they would have to ask for a garden plot near the pump. But there isn't always available. And they're not like handicap parking spaces. They're not reserved for the handicap. And Davis said, well, do we have to have trails for wheelchairs? I didn't go there. Anyways, I did not think that providing water was a burden. Any landlord, when he rents a place, has to provide water. And since plants need water, it seemed logical to me that the town should provide it. Excuse me, Rachel. I
Yeah,
saw your hand, Dave.
Alex, no, thanks for your observations. And it occurs to me, you've identified a need, a gap in what is currently on site and what needs to be in the future. And I'm wondering if addressing that gap is a different action than the way the suggested draft is. Like the town will endeavor to provide water, but there might be situations where we're in drought conditions, or it just may be financially not feasible at the moment. But on the flip side, if there are other grant mechanisms with CPA funding or other ways to get the infrastructure built that you're suggesting, that is a good thing. But to force the town department to put it in right now, not knowing what that cost is and what it is kind of hard.
Well, Dave will get to you in a second, but if if the town was in the process of applying for money, then its action is in progress. And when I pointed out that a neighbor was draining water onto the parking lot and that water was going across the parking lot into the garden and the whole slope of the parking lot was wrong, Dave took it upon himself to hire a contractor at some expense to fix all that. I'm sure it cost more than $10,000. I don't know why, that's just my guess. There was a considerable work re-leveling the parking lot and Dave found a way to do it. I think you could solve the water problem down there for less than it costs to fix the parking lot. And if it takes getting CPA money or something, great. I still don't think this is onerous, to use Dave's word. Dave, go ahead.
Oh, I'm unmuted. Yeah, I don't mean to belabor this at all. I think what I was simply looking for is some softening of the wording. First, I don't think the commission has the authority to direct the department. So when I see words like the department must post its contact information, or the department will provide. I think that's all well and good, but the commission does not oversee the department nor its staff. So I think if we could soften some of that language, that would be the way I would recommend this go, because I don't want to frustrate future commission members if they see that and then ask me or Aaron, hey, why aren't you doing that? And I think so softening some of that language would be helpful. I don't disagree with you, Alex, on providing water. Again, I just think to Rachel's point, in the case of, say, a drought, do if this is so directive, then if the gardeners are going through just tremendous amounts of water, which is very possible, I've been doing this a long time, um, does the town have an obligation to just keep providing that water and getting it delivered for those cisterns to provide? So I just think softening some of that language, for instance, the town will make every effort to provide water to all gardeners at the 2 locations, something like that. So I'm just looking for a little softening of the language um, um, on water. Something like I see the water, excuse me, the soil testing. Again, I just think a little softening there. For instance, at the community gardens at Fort River, for the most part, they're all individual gardens or raised beds. So what does testing really accomplish there when everybody's soil may be different? Those kinds of things. So I think it's just more of a softening and things like, the town will endeavor to provide water at each location, yada, 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 something like that. So that's all. Of course, we want to do that. I don't want to back away from this. We created those gardens, and to Alex's point earlier, I think we've had community gardens on conservation land for 50 years, 40 to 50 years.
Yeah.
That's all.
So, the last sentence in the soil testing goes on to the second page, and it says implementation of this condition by the town is dependent on availability of staff and budget.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
So, and I had Fort River in mind because it's right next to the garden's right next to the stream. I don't know what those soils are like, but I sort of envision somebody dumping a lot of fertilizer on there and not realizing what's needed. And I know they're all raised beds. I sort of assume they're all made out of the same soil from a bird's eye view. And a soil sample costs $20, and then that's not onerous. And they even tell you what the results are in home garden language. So it's not like they're not giving you pounds per acre like it's a hayfield. So my vision here was to have the soil sampled, and you can take, I mean, I've done this a gazillion times where you mix your sample, or you can take 2 or 3. Anyways, and then have the town post what seems like a reasonable fertilization rate for the gardens there. As I said, most people are new to gardening, don't have a clue. And I think it's a great service if the town was to post something about fertilizing. I know that that the groups who run the place have advice for people on what, to do organic gardening and this and that, but this seemed like a reasonable thing for the town to do, and it's not hard. I don't think it would take a lot of staff time. And that's my pitch. Michelle?
I was gonna suggest, before I forget, that we add to the sentence, as time and budget allows, something about also drought conditions. Rachel raised a good point that might change the I don't know, water delivery rate or expectation, just environmental conditions.
Yeah, so, Rachel, did you want to speak to that?
I was gonna speak to soils, but,
Go ahead.
okay. The testing question, it's, in my experience, it's, helpful to know what the organic content of the soils. That's what tends to hold the nutrients in. And then, so that's another test. And then knowing what the soil textural classification is will tell you how quickly it drains out. So sandy soils, for example, you tend to have to put more nutrients in more frequently because of that texture. But if it's clay soil, it's going to hold whatever you put in for a long time. And
Right,
so those are additional tests that we typically in the office we will ask for, so we can do it sort of like a more holistic evaluation of the situation. And that's where it starts to get expensive. So I would recommend taking out the comment, the sentence that says testing is inexpensive.
take out what? Take out what?
The statement in the draft language where it says testing is inexpensive. I recommend taking that out. And then it would be helpful to have clarity about expectation. Is the town doing the testing? Is someone, a volunteer in the community guard doing the testing? It's just unclear to me whose responsibility that is, and also at what density. You know, are you doing one sample for the whole garden, or is each plot? I could see it getting a little very expensive if each individual plot were tested.
So the two gardens are different. Amethyst Brook has no organization. They're just individuals. And Angela Mills is the one who administers that garden. Down at the other garden, there is an organization that is in charge, and Stephanie is involved, or has been to some degree. So I purposely put in testing is inexpensive because you told me it was going to cost $700 to $800 to test.
Because of all those other tests, and I was thinking of the density.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
But to get something reasonable in front of the gardeners is not expensive. And if somebody knows how to interpret a cation exchange capacity, they don't have to know about the soils. All of that will tell you is the ability of the soil to hold on to nutrients. And I was fortunate enough to take a soils course with when I was in college. And when Dr. Crunchy stood up in class, he says, I'm going to teach you the difference between dirt and soil. And we don't need to go there, but some rudimentary recommendations for gardeners is what I was after, not the be all and end all. Dave?
Yeah, I'm happy to keep this in there with that implementation of this condition by the town is dependent on availability. I will say, in general, I begin in these conversations sometimes, and this is across the board, is how much more can the town do? We do a lot for our residents. So if I had $800 to $1,000 just hanging around here somewhere in my office, I would a higher priority for me would be to work on the water quality in the Fort River, which is a spitting distance from the community garden. So if I had that money, I think that's a higher priority than doing the soil testing. I would leave it up to the gardeners to do it, but I'm happy to keep this in. So I would just go with it.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know about the drought. So you have a well at Fort River, and presumably that well gets water from the Fort River bank storage. I don't know what would happen in the case of drought, whether that well would still be productive or not. I don't know. But the biggest challenge, as I saw it in terms of water, was getting water from that well to a cistern. And if you had a 250-gallon tank like they use for maple syrup. Or a couple of them. They're around, they're not that expensive. And if you could figure out how to get the water from the well handle whether you pump to the cistern, to me, that was the biggest logistical issue.
If I
So
could, Alex,
Alex,
we're definitely talking about this with Stephanie Ciccarello. She's not here today. She sits 10 feet away from me, but we're definitely talking about cisterns at both locations. So I imagine we'll move forward with that this year.
Alex, I feel like we have an agreement about this document essentially, and I'm worried that we're gonna run out of time before we can work on anything else.
Okay, so we're running till 1:30, correct?
Yeah, still concerned about the number of things on the list.
So I do not have anything for beavers today. We're gonna go by that. We're gonna talk about indigenous land language. Which,
Okay, maybe I'm overly concerned.
no, you're nudging us along, which is good, which causes me to say, I don't know where our agreement is. I hear people saying, loosen up the language. I'm sitting there saying, what would it look like if it was a license or a permit? And I don't, does the town want to come in and get a license or a permit for use of conservation land for community gardens?
Well, yeah, we haven't talked about that.
That to me is the alternative.
I mean, it sounds like has said he's okay with keeping those items in and that they're working on having water in a cistern. So I guess where I'm at is, per your suggestion, Alex, have it be town managed, sort of carve out in our conservation areas, like with these guidelines.
Yeah, yeah, because we're basically bowing out. We're taking these parcels of conservation land and backing out of them and saying to the town, continue to do what you do.
I
That's
guess,
okay with me.
right, I guess I am concerned about how strict we are with the directive language of providing things. So I'm still in favor of softening it up but with, there's a clear expectation that water will at least be provided. It's concerning that it wasn't at Amethyst Brook. I mean, people could have lost some significant investments there.
Yeah. Right. And then that was my first visit to a community garden. And I called Angela about it, and she told me that was supposed to be filled by a local farmer. So the corn was all wilting, all the gardens were wilting, the weeds were growing, people had walked away from their gardens. Okay, so I don't quite know what to do with this. Do you want to move this to our next meeting? Do you want to edit it now? Do you want to leave it the way it is and send it to the commission for their review and comment?
What about using Rachel's endeavor to, I liked that, and then moving and calling it good and moving it to the commission?
So in like on D, ample water, the town will endeavor.
Yeah, that's a good word. Thank you, Rachel.
Okay, so D will say something like the town will endeavor to provide water consistently throughout the growing season. The rest will stay the same. And then on E, I haven't changed anything except availability of staff, budget, and we said something about conditions of drought.
Yes. Especially since we're in one.
So Dave, would you anticipate, we're in a drought now. Would the town anticipate that it would say in January that we're not going to offer community gardens to save because of the drought and save people from investing their time and energy? Or would you delay that until June and July and August and say we're no longer to provide water?
We certainly wouldn't make the decision in January. I mean, we have 70, approximately 70 gardeners at Fort River and 25 to 30 plus at Amethyst Brook. And this year was a pretty good year at both locations. So I just want to be, stay committed to offering those gardeners, those spaces next, this summer. So I think we're committed to doing it. And if we need to find a little funding,
Can I ask, let me ask, can I ask Dave a question that's tangential but related? Is it fair to say that Amherst as a town is less affected by critical drought level 3 than a lot of the other towns, given the resources, the water resources that we have that many others do not?
in general, I think those definitions have been developed for other purposes, for instance, for water supply. But to your point, Bruce, both gardens are in the floodplain of two major rivers, the Amethyst Brook and the Fort River. So there's significant groundwater resources in both locations.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
but again, I think cisterns are the way to go. I think cisterns are the way to go.
Thank you.
Me too. Okay, we're done with that. So are you okay with me making those changes, sending them to Aaron, copying you with the expectation that they will be made available for the commission to review and comment tomorrow?
Yes.
Wait, you want the commission to review and comment this section tomorrow?
Say what?
You want the commission to be able to comment on this community garden section tomorrow?
No, I want to present it to them for review and comment and give them a period of time to do that.
Yeah, we'll just make it sort of short so that they get the overview and then are prompted to go look at it.
Yeah, it doesn't have to take up much time at all. It's just tell
Yeah.
them it's available and then what the
Sounds good.
deadline is for commenting.
Okay.
And so we're in agreement that I'll make the changes to D, the town will endeavor to provide. Thank you, Rachel. And then we'll add the drought language to the bottom of E, which is about testing. And then ask for comments from the commission, and that will take 2 weeks or a week, or I'll rely on Aaron to figure out what a reasonable time period is, but I'd like to have comments back, Aaron, so that we can deal with them at our next meeting, which I think is the 17th. I could be wrong on that date.
It will be the 21st. The next land
So
management
we need
subcommittee.
to have a deadline prior to our next meeting so that everybody on the subcommittee can see whatever comments come in and deal with them on our next meeting. And then they go back to the commission for a vote.
These are small enough. I think we should give them a week.
I'm fine with that. Okay, can we close this out and go to Indigenous language? And then
Sure. And so I have
look to Bruce to lead off. Michelle has some thoughts.
So, having dug into this somewhat, not as deeply as it's needed, my concern is that this, in effect, carves out some language that's only for conservation land, but there's lots of other different kinds of land in the town. And so it feels like we're taking on something before or on behalf of other efforts that need to be done on this topic. And the more I read about the details and difficulties of and the reconsiderations that Native Americans have had over the last 10 years about these acknowledgement statements, it strikes me that this is not the appropriate venue for doing this work, that we should receive a acknowledgement statement that the town itself has worked out. And I acknowledge that it's a bigger task, and I don't mean to say that I don't want to do it, I'm going to shove it to somebody else. But I really don't think it's appropriate for this subcommittee or this commission to have its own versus the other kinds of land in the town. So I'm willing to work on it if Dave / some other town entity thinks they're going to attempt to do this. I'm willing to be, say, the representative for the commission on such a panel like the CPA. I'm willing to do that when the time comes. The other thing that comes to mind is that UMass has spent a huge amount of time developing theirs. It's very long. They have a written version, they have a verbal version. They have Native Americans who've worked with them as advisors that the town probably should at least start by discussing it with them. That's my suggestion.
Michelle,
Yeah, Bruce makes a good point about probably the town should be the first to establish this. So I hadn't thought about that, but that's a big consideration. I guess my intent in proposing this was to sort of make it a door opener for the conservation lands of Amherst to sort of be a first step in making some kind of access happen. So this was sort of a precursor to that thought. But as it stands, just as a land use acknowledgement, I mean, I guess I have to agree with Bruce that that should be a town endeavor first that we follow suit with. And anything else we can do can just be our own efforts on a side. But I wonder what department or group or board or whatever that town might be. I'll just mention that the couple sentences I wrote was like a short, very short, intentionally grabbed from the Amherst College and the UMass version. UMass is different because it's the Stockbridge School and it has more of a history, I guess, that isn't applicable to all of Amherst. But in any case, I also spoke to the Native Lands Conservancy, which is a indigenous, basically a NGO, and they are now holding easements in Massachusetts and nationally. And I asked them about their position on land use or land acknowledgements. And I don't know if anyone else saw the New York Times article recently. It was an opinion piece, but it was titled "Enough with the Land Acknowledgements Already." And it was to Bruce's point about they can become sort of rote and performative rather than attached to some kind of demonstrative actual land access and agreements and land back. So the NLC said that yes, in general, they should be written in conjunction with the Native people. For Amherst, those Native people aren't here anymore. And the closest to us, I think, is the Nipmuc. So it's kind of this, I don't know how UMass did it, but it is a hard one to, when there are no Native people to talk to about it. Anyway, that's all. Oh, but they also said they're not against them. They just should be attached to something like some actual action and not just a land use acknowledgement at the beginning of a document.
Well, and that's all the more reason why the town should endeavor to undertake this, because actual actions would need to be taken by the town because they almost certainly would have financial implications. Not necessarily, but probably. And so I think that one of the first steps is to go back to the advisors who worked with the two colleges and talk with them. because they've already have a history with the town. So I think it's up to Dave to advise us on what he thinks about how the town might do that, but that's my suggestion. It sounds like mostly Michelle agrees with it.
Dave,
Yeah, thanks. And I turned off my camera because I needed to eat lunch between meetings. But yeah, Michelle and I have been chatting a little bit about this, and I am going to reach out to our town attorney. They work with lots of other municipalities, so we're not the first. We won't be the last to kind of explore this, and so we'll get some feedback from the town attorney. But I think to Bruce's point and also Michelle's points about this might be a larger conversation to even have with the town council, because there's conservation land, but there's all this land that the town owns for recreation, for we own thousands and thousands of acres in this town for lots of different purposes. So maybe there is something that happens at the low, the higher, the highest elected official level, and then maybe there's other actions that follow that over the coming years at the conservation level, if you will. So I think it's a good chance to explore it.
And then just as a one minor follow-on reminder, the town owns lots of land in other towns, or at least one other town.
That is correct. If I could just add, speaking of actions, they're well, I'll save that for another day. Thanks.
a bite out of a sandwich takes precedent over
Mhm.
an additional thought. Okay, so are we putting this to bed?
I think so, because Dave was saying that he's taking certain steps. If you're willing for me to be the at least nominally the linkage point, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, I think Michelle is is the person who brought it to us first. Bruce spent a lot of time on it. Maybe you could work
Well,
with the team if the need be.
okay,
I mean,
we'll work together.
Sure. And I mean, I'm interested in looking at sort of the actionable on conservation land things, and then the land use acknowledgement to me is almost a totally different, challenging, more challenging thing. So yeah, Bruce, we can discuss
Right.
that offline.
And I don't feel it needs to be formalized at this point, but I'm happy to work with you on it.
Okay, so closing out the indigenous land conversation, I just wanted to go back to where we are as we close. And I'm going to change the language in community gardens, expecting that to be put in front of the commission tomorrow for their review and comment. And we're going to continue bird banding to our next meeting. Hopefully we can find the language that Michelle put together for research projects and land use applications. So that will be an objective for our next meeting, is to find that language so that we can figure out how to merge things.
Yeah, and I will, make an effort to find that language and then give it to everybody as soon as possible, so everybody can make edits to it now with this discussion on the table.
Okay,
And beavers.
they're coming.
Okay,
They're coming.
I'm not pressuring, I'm just noting it on the list.
Oh, I've been working on it. I was hoping to have it done. I've been in conversation with the town of Ipswich, who has had an interesting thing on their website. And one of the comments is that folks not use the emergency certification as a shortcut through the regulatory process, that if it's not a real emergency, they come in with an NOI. And I can't remember somebody coming in for an NOI on a beaver issue. It's all been emergencies, which aren't really oftentimes emergencies. So, and then I'm trying to put together some guidelines on when it's okay to reduce water levels and up to what what, what, on how much to reduce them and things like that.
I,
Aaron,
I just wanted to let you guys know that the research section, the last date I have of editing on that is 10/2/23. And it's under the land use application section of the land use policy.
Thank you, Erin.
So it's there. I emailed it to Michelle with the detail of what she noted. I'm not really sure how. I mean, like these sections, for example, like the bird banding, maybe it needs to get integrated into the land use application section, but there is some language in there on that iteration of the draft. I am sort of contemplating how all the sections that we've broken out are going to be sort of merged into our overall document, our land use document. And that was, when we broke off talking about agriculture, I think the intent was to finalize it and then insert it back into the land use policy. But we've now broken out all these little sections that weren't originally part of the land use policy. And so I guess that's something for us to discuss in the future, how we're going to reintegrate this back into the last draft that we had been editing.
why wouldn't they go back into where they came from? I don't think there's anything new in terms of sections.
Well, I think bird banding is a good example. Like
That's
yeah,
that's
but
unusual.
yeah. But I don't know if there was any other little things that came up. I mean, beavers, I think, is a good example. Like there's not a separate section for beavers to my knowledge, so I'm not sure where we'll integrate that. And, obviously we're talking about beaver, the commission's policy on beavers on its lands. That's kind of the intent of our integrating it into the policy. So maybe under rules and regulations or under its own section, I'm not sure, but
Yeah, I think beavers is a mm, potentially a multifaceted conversation. Yeah, Michelle,
Um, would it be okay if I excerpt the land use application section as a whole, make a couple tweaks to the research section that I wrote, and then distribute it to you guys? And I could do that very shortly, and then we can work on it from there.
sure.
I mean, you
Thank
can,
you.
Michelle. It's just like this was a quick search that I did to try to find the most recent draft I had saved. I I don't know if there might be another version. So there was a period of time when we were meeting as a land management subcommittee where we were live editing the document in sessions, and I was saving them by meeting date. So I knew what edits we made by meeting date. But at a certain point in time, which I think is around October of 23, that system changed. And I think there may have been edits happening outside of the session of the document, and it was getting kind of passed around via email. So I just want to caution you, like there may be more updated versions so that's why I gave that date of 10/2 is what I have is the most recent version saved in my folders. But I think we need to make sure we check our emails and see if there's any other more up-to-date versions of the document that
Okay.
I'll do that, and maybe
I'll,
Alex can do it too. I just want to also caution, if I do what I said I was going to do, which is excerpt the whole land use policy application policy, that there's stuff in there about like costs of wedding applications and things like that, and I don't know if those are up to date, because I just looked at it and I think we commented on things so far. So I almost want to just maybe we'll just ignore everything except the research section. I don't know what to do.
Those were never finalized, Michelle,
Okay.
and those aren't in, this was never implemented.
Oh, I
For
know, but I feel like we have this like $10 application fee, but it used to be
Right.
50, and then someone's like, why are we even charging any money at all? This is silly. And
Yeah, no,
then
we don't charge anything.
okay, I just
And
think there's been some comments on other aspects of the land use application page that aren't reflected in this document, that 10.2 document. So I'm just cautioning everybody
right.
about that.
Right. Well, and that's what I'm worried about with us pulling versions out and passing them around is like we don't have a master version that's most up to date. So there may have been, yeah.
Do you have a suggestion for how to maybe just address this specific section? Just cut it out of that one and
You're talking
I
about
mean,
land use applications and research proposals?
yeah.
Why don't you just cut out the most pertinent language and leave the rest?
Because it sort of references some of the preambles of the research application. I mean, the land use application.
So do what you think's best. and
Yeah,
we'll-
I think when I send it, just ignore everything else. And I don't know
Maybe,
what else.
maybe use Alex's approach of highlighting in yellow the part we're supposed to read.
Sure.
Okay, we're gonna wind up pretty soon. Aaron,
oh, sorry.
anybody else for the good of the cause have anything to say? Dave, still with us? Done with his lunch and onto his meeting.
I mean,
We've done a lot, so. Hey,
Can I just ask a question? What do you have a sense, Aaron, of who would take on a land acknowledgement and as town staff or like department or commission or something? Is there an obvious? Oh, there's Dave.
I'm here. I've been here the whole time. Um, why don't I bring it up to Paul Bachman later this week? I meet with him on Thursday afternoon. I don't know. I suggested earlier that it would likely be at some higher level, at the town council level or town manager level. So let me ask Paul about it.
And can I raise my hand and ask a leading question about this whole subject? And it has to do with what does Bruce and Michelle have in mind as an end result? And all I want to do is ask, are you envisioning giving land back?
Who are you
well, I at
asking?
least have no vision of what the end goal is. It would depend a lot on the process and what the people, especially Native Americans who were involved in the process, had as suggestions that came out of it. I have no precondition or pre-thought about it.
Who are you asking, Alex?
Both of you.
I mean, I'll just echo what Bruce said. I don't want to have something, but what I do know is just what other people are doing. Most of them are private landowners and not public landowners, so it's different what's possible. So like there's cultural respect easements out there, but those are perpetual legal documents that may not work for municipal lands. There are access agreements. My sense is that they're interested, the NLC as a organization is interested in perpetual agreements, but the Nipmuc and other towns have had access agreements, often in terms of like harvesting traditional plants and things, which we may not have. I mean, it could be a lot of things, and I don't want to make big assumptions without talking to more, other people about it. But that just from the NLC was their interest, but they're also not local really. So it's another thing.
So there was a school in northern Vermont that dedicated a garden space for Native Americans to raise traditional foods. And the people who used it planted seeds that they thought were ancient or genetically the plants were genetically ancient. And that garden space was dedicated pretty much to them to raise traditional foods. We have community gardens. I didn't know if you thought, well, maybe we could have a garden space reserved just for indigenous people to plant indigenous type foods. I don't know.
Yeah,
just
or the
interested in-
agricultural, all the agricultural spaces.
No. Well, I think we should gather as many ideas and options as we can as part of the process.
Okay. Okay, leaving that, going to the agricultural policy, we have the ranking form, which wants to be in landscape orientation. And Michelle and Rachel was helping me figure out how to integrate a landscape page into a portrait document. And I could use some help with that because I wanted to put the ranking form in the appendix. And I don't know how to do that. So with your permission, and if Rachel's available, maybe I could work with Rachel on how to figure out how to do that, even though she's not on this committee.
I agree.
Are you willing, Rachel?
Happy to help format.
Okay, good, thanks. So we have built the appendices and passed them on to the commission, not lately, but when we've added something, we've tried to pass it to them to keep them up to date on what's in. And so I look forward to sending that to the commission again, not tomorrow, but maybe in preparation for our next meeting, have that appendices. Okay.
Wonderful.
It's now 1:28. I'd love to give 2 minutes back.
Thank you.
Are there any
And
comments?
do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Michelle?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much, Dave, Rachel, Aaron. Been a pleasure.
Okay, bye everyone.
Bye.